I think I'm with you that I think there's every reason to objectively think the Bears can win this game. And in some ways, the way they're playing might be the better team, but there's no reason to trust them to do that.
Yeah, it's a trust issue, isn't it? And it kind of bothered me picking against them because I thought for 55 minutes last Sunday in Detroit, they played really, really well. And they were showing signs of a team that was making the climb that we wanted to see them make. But then in crunch time, they just find ways to step on the banana peel and fall down the hole and you can't get out of it. And so, yeah, I guess it's just a see it to believe it thing right now until they prove otherwise.
So what are you looking for inside of this game? Because Dan, what I'm looking for is, did you learn from the first game you played against Brian Flores that maybe you can't do some of the stuff that you want to do because he's gonna try to speed up everything that you do offensively?
Right. And some of that stuff that you are going to have to be careful with is moving the pocket and doing some of those play action rollouts, because when they send pressure from all directions in such unpredictable fashion, it's hard to know what you can get away with and what you can't. And so you're going to have a different style of offense than you had in Detroit, and you're going to have to be on your P's and Q's. This game offensively for the Bears is going to come down to how well they handle their protections, and that's the center, it's the quarterback, it's the play caller, it's everyone kind of being synced in a way that allows you to have success. And obviously we know no matter who was playing quarterback, Justin for 2.5 quarters, Bagent for the last quarter and a half, 6 weeks ago, they didn't handle it well. And they walked out of there with 13 points and a hard to swallow loss. And so really, like, from that end of things, Laurence, it's handling the protection that I think is going to go a long way to determining how much success they have offensively.
It's amazing to me too that if we go back to that game, how differently the two seasons have turned out. And it's really striking considering what Minnesota was up against with losing Kirk Cousins, losing Justin Jefferson, and to now see them in a position where they have a decent shot of being a playoff team is wild.
Well, you say striking, I say depressing, because it tells you that these types of bounce backs and resurgence are possible. They just haven't been possible for the Bears, and it's problematic. You look at the Broncos also. I watched them go win a football game against a pretty good Browns team yesterday, and you go, man, like, that team is not head and shoulders above you talent-wise. You saw that when you played them. The Vikings aren't head and shoulders above the Bears talent-wise, particularly in their current construct, and yet they're getting on these rolls that they put together prolonged winning streaks. The Bears haven't had a single winning streak in the Matt Eberflus era, and so it's just bothersome that you just haven't been able to create any sort of momentum for 2 seasons, and you've got to find a way to do that. And one of the ways to do that is when the game gets late and you're still in it, you have to figure out a way to close, and that's identifying playmakers on both sides of the ball, and then having coaches that manage the game in a way that allows you to finish it off. And the Bears haven't been able to do it. The Vikings for 2 seasons have, I think, 16-5 under Kevin O'Connell in 1-score games. Contrast that with Matt Eberflus's 2-11 record, and you kind of are left with that empty feeling in your stomach.
I don't know what you made of the Albert Breer thought over the weekend that his understanding that Kevin Warren was going to be more involved in football decisions, and it may be both Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles, whose jobs are in jeopardy here. But going into the bye week, there's always a little more gravity, win or loss. If the Bears can't win, is it possible that Matt Eberflus is fired before they play next?
I don't see it. I still don't see that being one of the pages you can turn to in the choose your own adventure with this team. And look, like, we're 6 weeks from the finish line, and that's not that far off for them to come to their real crossroads in terms of the big decisions they have to make. David and I talked a little bit about Albert Breer's sentiments, and we talked about just how we're all going to have to get ready for this period here now, which will be 6 to 10 weeks long of a lot of noise. And some of it will be informed speculation. Some of it will be just purely speculation. Some of it will be reporting-based fact, and it will all be together in a stew. And you're just going to kind of have to go through it and figure out what's what. I just think that there's a lot of season left for the evaluators at Haugh to kind of try to figure out where things are going. And my personal hunch is that the strong bond that Kevin and Ryan have is something that may ultimately influence decisions when we get to January. Now, again, like there's a lot of football left and a lot of evidence to compile to see where this thing goes, but we're just going to have to be ready to kind of play ping pong with a lot of these, like I say, these quote unquote reports or these thoughts that are kind of lobbed around by a lot of different people.
I don't know where you stand on this when it comes to the quarterbacks at the top of the draft, but to go to another report, the Ian Rappaport report last week of them using a phrase that is commonly used by Ryan Poles of, the Bears would have to be blown away to move on from Justin Fields. I wonder if inside their evaluations of let's say the top 5 quarterbacks that are coming out this year, if they've been like, you know what, I feel like we should probably just roll with the guy that we have. But then the issue becomes, well, what are you going to pay that guy if you do think that he's going to be?
And do you have to extend him sooner rather than later?
Yeah. So how do you think they're trying to navigate this when it comes to the evaluation of Justin Fields, if it is continuing, versus the evaluation of guys in college that in some cases have been underwhelming?
Yeah. So this is an interesting conversation, Laurence, because there's so much involved with it. And first of all, like the 2 words blown away from Ian's report were the ones everybody kind of latched onto and sort of ran with. But in his story, he also mentioned like 5 or 6 boxes that the Bears wanted Justin to check down the stretch of the season so they could be confident in who he was as a quarterback. It included, having that pocket presence. It included winning games late, which, we haven't seen in the last 2 years at all. And so there was kind of 2 things butting heads with each other. They'd have to be blown away, but they also still want to see their current quarterback accomplish things and prove that he is worth sticking with. Now, they're going to be a beneficiary and a victim of circumstance because they're going to have at minimum a top 3 pick. They may have the number 1 overall pick. And so it gives you freedom in a way that, you have to use properly. And you don't have the fallback of like, well, we just weren't picking high enough, so we're going to roll with the guy that we have because we think we can make it work. Because if that's the route you choose and then you pass up, every single quarterback in this class, you're going to be judged by how every single quarterback in this class ultimately fares. And so that's a pretty huge dice roll, given a lot of the things we've heard about Caleb Williams, the football player, for a long time, the things we hear about some of the other prospects on this board, which include obviously Drake May,
Jaden Daniels.
Right. Jaden Daniels playing really well. There's buzz in circles for Penix. You hear JJ McCarthy's name come up here and there as a guy that, if you didn't want to pick in the top 5 and
if you didn't want to ever pass the ball.
Right. Well, right. Like that complicates the evaluation, right? What they're doing with them. But so look, like you have this ultimate freedom and it's probably a good thing, but in some ways it just creates a situation where you have to consider absolutely everything. And it's going to be, I think, probably a landmark moment in Bears history to determine which path they choose, because there's a lot to possibly go down.
Especially because of we don't know what Kevin Warren is going to want to Bigfoot his way into doing. And this team, if it were Warren just saying, look, you're all fired, and here's the quarterback I want, and this is what we're doing, and we're hiring these people, and we're all on the same page because I say so. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Whether Ryan Poles is out scouting these guys and whatever, his scouts are out formulating these opinions, we don't know what matters. We have no idea what matters.
We also don't know whose eyes matter. And we
That's
also
what I mean.
don't know, right. Like, and so like, I get questions all the time about how do you see player X fitting in 2024? And the stock answer is, I don't know, because I have no idea who's coaching them. You know what I mean? And so like, the pivot points for this organization are coming. And until we get there, we're just kind of left in a major guessing game to what they're going to do philosophically, what path they want to go down to, who's going to be the person that is at the controls making the decisions. And so, this is going to get super interesting real soon. Like it's vintage Bears existence where we're left to endure a mediocre to below average football season in order to get to the stuff that's interesting, which is going to happen in the 2024 offseason, which, as I said, now we're closing in on 6 or 7 weeks away, and we're going to be into this period where it's going to be a lot more fascinating than any of these games that the Bears play down the stretch of the season.
You've made it known on these airwaves and on the podcast that you think that some of the stuff that we've talked about when it pertains to Luke Getty and Justin Fields is maybe a little bit overstated. That being said, what things did they do well as a tandem last week, and how convinced are you that they're going to stay on the same page?
Well, same page I'm confident in. Same plan I'm not so sure of, because as we talked about it at the outset here, there's a lot of different puzzles you have to solve when you're playing a defense like tonight. The opening drive last week was a masterpiece. To go down the field, score a touchdown, not face third down, and do things in a variety of ways where your quarterback got on the move, your quarterback made plays, you were able to finish a drive. It was great. Everything was in flow, particularly after the quarterback had been out of game action for 35 days. That was terrific stuff. It was really good for most of the afternoon. Now there's some moments, there's some hiccups where they weren't able to capitalize on takeaways. There's some hiccups where, you get down after the 29-yard run that Justin had and a penalty tacked onto that, and you stalled out at a moment where you could have just absolutely landed the knockout blow. And there was a lot baked into that in terms of what went right and what went wrong and where they went. I'll tell you this, if you go back and watch the 3rd and 7 play that caused a lot of consternation, which rightfully so, the Bears, it was a 2-yard run to Roschon Johnson. And you say, boy, it seems like they really took their foot off the gas there. Well, I couldn't get a single answer straight on that play. And usually over the course of a week, when you ask a bunch of different people, you can solve a mystery on a play. Nobody would answer that question straightforwardly. And you watch it, and it looks like it's some brand of RPO, because Darnell Mooney seems to be setting up to be blocking for a potential pass out to the right side to DJ Moore, and the ball didn't go there, and it was handed to Roschon Johnson. And you're just trying to figure out, okay, so what went wrong in that moment, and how do they solve that? Because it's 3rd and 7 at a moment where, again, you have a chance to just finish this game off, and you end up settling for the field goal. And you guys, I know, referenced it last week. Jared Goff basically said that was our cue, that we were going to go win the game, that they left the door open for us to storm through it, and we went ahead and did that. And so you've got to solve that, and you've got to figure that out. To your question about Luke and Justin, like, you just have to be in sync the entirety of a game, and you have to be able to be communicating in a way where everybody's set up for success. And when those critical stages of a game arise, you got to go finish. You just have to go finish. And I think the updated stats now, the last 2 seasons, 1 for 16 when they've had the ball in the final 8 minutes with a chance to put a drive that would put them ahead or tie the game.
While we are solving mysteries, and we have either our pencil-thin mustaches on respectively or our deerstalker caps, why can't the Bears properly explain the Montez Sweat play percentage stuff? It got weird where it's like, hey, other teams' stars play a lot more. Well, that's just how we do it. This is how we do it. We rotate them. They throw their fastballs, and we rotate them. That's how we do it. And like, well, wait, why isn't your best player playing more? Well, that's how we do it. I don't get it, and the responses have yet to be satisfactory from my perspective.
Agreed. I wrote about this morning in my storylines package for tonight's game, and it just looked like you made it clear who you thought Montez was when you went and traded a 2nd-round pick and then guaranteed him $60+ million on a $98 million deal. And when the game is there to be won, he needs to be on the field. Like,
sounds easy.
You're supposed to practice harder so that they're conditioned for these moments. You're supposed to have hits principle stuff where guys are ready for that. And
track shoes.
Your track shoes.
Right. And one of the sequences that I loved last week is, we were all bothered by them kicking the field goal on 4th and 1. Okay, well, you go up 2 scores there. It's 23-14. The Lions get the ball back. And the very first play of the next drive is Montez Sweat's first sack as a Bear. And he just absolutely stuns Jared Goff with his closing speed, sacks him for a loss of 8, and you get a 3 and out. And it's just like that whole compromising football. If you're going to go ahead and be conservative, then your defense has to rise up to that moment and get you the ball back right away. And they did. Quick 3 and out. Bears hold the ball for the next 8 minutes and have a chance to close that game. And it's because Montez Sweat took over that next drive on the very first play. So keep him on the field. And again, like Mark Potash did a great job last week in pushing Matt and saying, look, like, Aiden Hutchinson is clearly the Lions' best player. And he sat out for all of 6 snaps last week in a game where his defense was on the field for more than 40 minutes. And he still, on his very final play of the afternoon, had the ability to go get a strip sack that won the football game. So like, you can't have these breakdowns. You just can't have these miscommunications or these platoons or whatever you want to call it. And this is why to Lawrence's question earlier about, it being striking the where the Vikings have gone and where the Bears have gone, it's just depressing because like every time that there's a chance, you find a way to get in your own way and not allow yourself a greater chance of finding that victory.
Just be more like Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was asked about the fake punt, and he was like,
My fault.
my
bad call."
fault.
Yep.
I did that. It was wrong. It was stupid. Just be more like Dan Campbell, which is something that we should all try to do. Dan Wiederer, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
All right, fellas, enjoy the game.
That's Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune.